Hi, welcome to Writing with Yvonne. Today I'm going to be talking to you about editing poems. So, editing is an art, and I've often heard it said that all writing is rewriting. And I'll tell you today about the process I use to edit my own poems. I'll give you a few insights into how people have helped me to do that. And I'll focus on one of my poems. It's called Harrier. And I had some critical friends from my trusted writing group who came to my aid when I knew that some stuff in the poem wasn't really working, but I didn't know why, and they helped me to fix it. So when I have a draft of one of my poems, I will have a few things that I have at the forefront of my mind. Firstly, I'll think, okay, is the title doing the work I want it to do? I might want quite a plain title that sort of labels the poem, but when I'm reading, I actually prefer titles that are enticing, that make me want to read on, that almost lure me in a little bit like a riddle. I'm often curious about what is going to come next. I know that I will want the first line and the first few lines of my poem to do quite a lot of work. They are the first thing the reader sees. They are the first things that an editor will see if I send my poem out to a literary magazine wanting to get it published. So I know that those lines are going to be quite important. I will look to catch myself repeating the same word over and over. If there's a word I can vary, I am going to vary it. And that's time for me to get the thesaurus and to see, okay, well, can I use an alternative word? Can I make the poem better by using elegant variation? I'll look at the tone, so sometimes I will have to remind myself that a shorter, plainer word, even if it's a slightly unusual short word, is going to be better than a very, very long, unwieldy piece of jargon. On the other hand, if I'm writing cliches, I'm probably going to have to pull them out. I will usually be quite tolerant if a character is using cliches as part of their everyday speech, because that's how people talk. On the other hand, if I feel that I want my writing to feel more literary, what's quite good fun is sometimes you can mess with cliches and you can find a way of rewriting them that sounds more elegant and that is a bit fresher. I will be quite vigilant about how my poem actually looks on the page. So if I have long, raggedy lines, some longer, some shorter, lots of variation, I will want that to do a lot of work. If I'm writing a poem where there's a lot of movement, or let's say there's a creature that is going back and forth, or perhaps I'm evoking a landscape where there's something like a few trees scattered across a field, I might want an open, expansive form. Otherwise, I will favour something more orderly where I have a similar line length for all of my lines. Quite often I will want a regular pattern of stanza length, so 6 lines, 6 lines, 6 lines, 6 lines, maybe a couplet at the end. I don't write super formal poetry. I don't get obsessed with villanelles. I will write in form if I think the poem is asking for it, but I don't push it. But with my own poems, I quite like orderliness. I will be aware as well that the last line of a poem and the last words of a poem are carrying a certain amount of weight. I need them to be doing work. I want them either to bring the poem to a ringing conclusion, or I might want my poem to sound a bit more open-ended and questioning. So if I'm putting together a collection, the reader wants to read the next one. I might want to use either approach there. And I will read the poem aloud, and I will make sure that nothing I've written sounds really clunky when it's actually voiced, because I know I'm probably going to be going to readings with a bit of luck, and I'm going to be reading my work in front of other people, and if it is impossible to pronounce or something does not sound quite right when I read the work aloud, that is my cue to go back and think carefully about the way I am wording the poem. I can remember one of the times when I really needed the help of my writing group was when I was wanting to write a poem about a hen harrier, and I did something quite embarrassing. I managed to send all of my drafts to my friends in my writing group, and I was really embarrassed about this because they were 15 pages long and they were incredibly messy, so I was showing half-made work to other people and it was terrible. And all of my false starts, all the things that I would normally want to correct before I showed the work to anybody were still there. And I remember my friend emailing me and saying, "Oh, there are 15 pages worth here. Have you sent us the right thing?" And I said, "Oh dear. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not expecting you to read all of that." And my first drafts were rubbish. If you are able to create a poem that feels as though it comes out of the first draft almost fully formed, then you are a very lucky person. I am not like that. It takes a lot of quite diligent repeat work and a lot of time and a lot of effort for me to feel like I have something that I am comfortable sharing with other people. And even now I get a little bit nervous during that sharing process, but ultimately I know that it's good for me. So I had my poem about the hen harrier, and my first attempts at this were a load of really kind of scruffy nature notes combined with some bad Ted Hughes style lines. Like, I wrote things like land waster, killer of grouse. So I was on Old English or Old Norse poetic mode there. What I was producing was very uneven in tone, so nature notes and observational notes and field guide descriptions feel very different from that kind of punchy use of fairly bloodthirsty metaphors that we might get from a writer like Ted Hughes. And when I mixed them both together, the results were not very good, and I was not pleased with what I came up with, and I thought, I'm going to have to keep working at this before I'm happy with it. I then reread a poem by Simon Armitage called The Christening, and this goes right back to my interest in titles that make me feel curious and want to read on, because The Christening does not sound like it should be a poem about a sperm whale, but that poem is. And Simon Armitage's sperm whale poem is a monologue from the perspective of a whale, but it has thoughts about the Green Party and it has strong opinions about various very human-sounding issues, and it's quite a quirky and funny and offbeat poem. And because it's designed like a monologue, it sounds quite conversational. So I had these three voices in my attempts at a hen harrier poem, and none of them really sounded like me. So there was the conversational animal monologue voice that I was ripping off Simon Armitage. There was a very punchy, quite bloodthirsty voice that was Ted Hughes on a bad day, and then there was that annoyingly omniscient, all-knowing, know-it-all nature guide voice. They were not working together properly, so I thought, okay, right, let's just condense this and strip it right back to what a harrier would think, what a hen harrier might say, what it would focus on, what the day-to-day business of its existence might be. So I thought, okay, it would think about its territory, it would think about its young, it would think about its mate. If it had any of those slightly human-like concerns, a bit like the Simon Armitage poem, it would think about all the legends associated with it, and it would also be concerned about what many people observe to be the illicit persecution of birds of prey. I think this is a large, powerful bird of prey. It would be very annoyed at the idea that people come along with binoculars and stare at it. It doesn't like that in my poem. It also doesn't like the idea that humans think they own what it sees as its territory. And I should really say what she sees as her territory, because it's a mother hen harrier. And that, I think, is important for distinguishing my work from both the Simon Armitage poem and from my Ted Hughes on the Rampage attempt at an earlier draft of the hen harrier poem. The hen harrier in my poem is mainly concerned with defending her eggs. and she is prepared to defend them at all costs, including by using violence. But that is rather different from the kind of predatory violence, mostly among male animals, that we would see in a Ted Hughes poem, like one of his jaguar or pike poems. I hope that my focus and my subject matter differentiates my work from theirs, and I didn't really want too much of that nature guide voice to be in the poem, although naturally if the hen harrier is talking about itself, it might give us some interesting facts. And I showed the poem when I was almost satisfied with it to friends at my poetry writing group. So what we do every week is a few days in advance we will share a draft and we give each other feedback. So it's possible to read most of the drafts in advance of the feedback session. We meet online most Thursdays, there's a meeting and everybody reads their poem and then they remain quiet while everybody else comments on it. This is incredibly useful. I don't think I have ever quite got used to the process of having 6 other poets all kind of pile in and say, "Oh, Yvonne, don't you think you could move that bit there?" Or, "Oh, I think that set answer's not quite working," or "I think that needs to be the title and shift that there, and is that quite the right word?" I always feel a little bit put under the spotlight by that. But ultimately, I know that everybody is in the same boat, everybody else is sharing their work, and if I wanted to, a much more private venue for doing that would be a one-to-one meetup with a critical friend or through a mentoring type arrangement. So they came up with some very interesting things for me. So my writing group thought that the hen harrier should be very, very assertive. And originally in one of my drafts, my hen harrier says, "I will answer to." That's too passive. What my writing group suggested was, "You may call me." Now that sounds regal. The harrier sounds queenly when she says, "You may call me." You know, she's looking down at you from some moorland outcrop that she has perched on when she says things like that. And the poem worked far better when I got to that point. Somebody else told me that a word I had used, which is haggard, didn't actually work too well in the context in which I was using it. So haggard means a wild caught falconry bird, literally. But when we use it in a more figurative way, it can mean looking really tired, looking exhausted. And I was thinking more of the figurative sense. So in my poem, the hen harrier is really tired of being stared at and really tired of being disturbed by other creatures and by humans. It just wants to be left in peace. It wants to look after its eggs. And that's very important. And I thought, no, because haggard sounds like harrier, because haggard sounds like hacked off, which is one of the other things I have in an early line in my poem, I am going to keep it. So there are times when I very much take on board helpful suggestions, and then there are times when actually I realise I don't have to do everything everybody else is suggesting. And when I look at poems by students, I have a few rules of thumb that I can use to help them if they want my feedback. So I will say, can you vary the vocabulary you're using? Do you need the word screamed 3 times in the space of the same poem? Because it's a short poem, we have a confined amount of space. Can we vary it? Why not use yelled? I will look at the tense of the poem and the viewpoint it's written from, and I will say, okay, well, actually it looks as though the whole thing is in the past tense, but it's gone into the present. Maybe that's something that's left over from an earlier draft. Is that something we could adjust? Something British editors will sometimes be sticklers for is also cutting out little words. So I've heard that the British line or the Irish line is quite compressed in poetry. There's an economy to the way we express ourselves, and throwaway phrases that we would have in prose, like "and then there was," and so on, if there are any small words and connecting phrases that I can do without in a poem, or that I think somebody else could do without, I will advise them that maybe we might not think they were needed. One that I really enjoy is grounding poems in things that are concrete, so objects that we can see, places, situations, characters, and in the five senses, so what we can see, what we can hear, touch, smell, and taste. And that will really bring the poem alive for our readers. If the poem is full of very abstract feelings and abstract ideas, love, hate, death, a vision, heaven, torment, it might be less effective than when we have a character who simply steps on a drawing pin in somebody else's office. It goes through their shoe into their foot and they're starting to hop about in terrible pain. We don't need the abstract words and all the emotional language when we have an action or an event. These are just some of the ways that I edit my own work. I don't see there as being hard and fast rules. I see there as being maybe some conventions that we can use. And it's a process that I enjoy every bit as much as doing the first draft, because it's through editing that we refine our work, it's through editing that we get it ready for publication, and it's through editing that we learn to see our own work through our readers' eyes. So I really do think that editing is a special art for writers.